Picture this: you're cleaning out your grandmother's attic, and tucked behind a stack of dusty photo albums, your fingers brush against something unexpected. A wooden box, heavy with secrets, bearing a label that makes your blood run cold. Not to be opened until 70 years have passed. What would you do? Walk away? Or do what that anonymous Virginia Beach resident did in 2014, pry it open and unleash something that would shake the very foundations of everything we think we know about death, consciousness, and the future of human existence? Because what they found inside wasn't just papers. It was a transcript that's been systematically scrubbed from the internet, banned from academic discussion, and whispered about only in the darkest corners of consciousness research. A final interview with Edgar Cayce, the most documented psychic in history, recorded just months before his death in 1945. And if you're watching this video, you're about to become one of the few people on Earth who knows what he really said about what happens when we die. But I'm warning you right now, this knowledge will change you. There's no going back once you hear this. So before we dive deep into this rabbit hole together, hit that like button if you're brave enough to face the truth, and subscribe because what I'm about to share with you is just the beginning of revelations that most people aren't ready to handle. The story starts in Virginia Beach, 1944. Edgar Cayce, exhausted from decades of trance readings, agrees to one final, off-the-record interview. Not with a journalist or scientist, but with someone whose identity remains unknown to this day. Someone who knew exactly what questions to ask. The recording was made on a wire recorder, primitive technology that captured not just words, but the subtle inflections, the long pauses, the moments where Cayce's voice dropped to almost a whisper as he revealed truths that were never meant for public consumption. But here's where it gets really strange. The transcript begins with Cayce saying something that should terrify every single person watching this video. Everything you've been told about death is a carefully constructed lie. The real journey begins after your last breath, and humanity is completely unprepared for what's coming. You see, most people think death is either the end of everything, or a simple transition to heaven or hell. Cayce shattered that comfortable illusion by describing 7 distinct levels that every soul must navigate after leaving the physical body. And what he revealed about these levels doesn't just change how we understand death, it changes how we should be living right now. The first level, he called it the transition zone. Imagine waking up from the deepest sleep of your life, but you can't quite shake off the dream. That's where newly departed souls find themselves. They're conscious, but reality feels thick, sluggish, like moving through honey. The devastating part, most people don't even realize they're dead. Cayce described watching souls in this level desperately trying to communicate with their living loved ones, growing increasingly frustrated when no one responds. They see familiar places, familiar faces, but it's all slightly off, like a photograph that's been double exposed. Some souls get trapped here for decades, maybe longer, because they refuse to accept their new reality. But here's the crucial part that changes everything. Cayce claimed that certain living people can actually perceive these stuck souls. Have you ever felt like someone was watching you when no one was there? Ever caught movement in your peripheral vision that vanished when you turned to look? According to Cayce, you might be sensing souls trapped in the first level, desperately trying to make contact. The second level, reflection, is where things get psychologically brutal. Every soul must relive their entire earthly existence, but not from their own perspective. They experience every moment through the eyes of everyone they ever interacted with. Every kindness they showed, they feel as the recipient. Every cruelty they inflicted, they experience as the victim. Cayce described this as simultaneously the most agonizing and most healing experience possible. A soul might spend what feels like years experiencing the joy they brought to a stranger with a simple smile, followed by the crushing pain they caused with a thoughtless word. It's not punishment, It's perfect understanding, complete empathy. This is where true remorse is born, not from guilt or shame, but from genuine comprehension of our impact on others. Cayce said that souls who fully embrace this level often develop what he called the Christ consciousness, an absolute understanding of interconnectedness that transforms them forever. But some souls can't handle the weight of this perfect empathy. They fragment, split apart, and these fragments sometimes find their way back to the living world, attaching to people who are emotionally or spiritually vulnerable. Ever wonder why some people seem to carry pain that isn't theirs? Why empaths can be overwhelmed by emotions that don't belong to them? The third level awareness is where souls begin to understand the true structure of reality. Cayce described it as suddenly seeing the code behind the matrix of existence. Souls meet what he called beings of light, not angels or demons, but evolved consciousnesses who communicate through direct transmission of knowledge. These beings don't speak in words. They download entire concepts, complete understanding, directly into the soul's consciousness. Imagine learning a foreign language not by studying it, but by suddenly knowing it completely, as if you'd spoken it your entire life. That's how knowledge is transmitted at the third level. Here's where it gets really interesting for those of us still alive. Cayce claimed that some souls at this level are sent back, not reincarnated, but temporarily returned to the physical world with their expanded awareness intact. These are the people we call psychics, mediums, healers, prophets. They retain their connection to the third level while inhabiting a physical body. But Cayce issued a stark warning about the fourth level and beyond. He said that fewer than 1 in 10,000 souls ever progress past the third level. Why? Because what lies ahead requires a complete abandonment of everything we think we are. It demands the dissolution of ego, identity, and individual will. The fourth level, he named it the mirror corridor, is where the soul confronts something that most people would consider impossible. You don't just review your life choices, you experience all the lives you could have lived. Every decision you made created a branching path, and in the mirror corridor, you walk down every single one of those paths. In one branch, you see yourself forgiving that person who hurt you deeply. In another, you watch yourself consumed by revenge. In a third, you witness yourself becoming a monk, dedicating your life to spiritual service. In a fourth, you experience yourself committing the crime you almost committed in life, but pulled back from at the last moment. The horror isn't that these are just possibilities. According to Cayce, these alternate selves are real, living, breathing entities existing in parallel dimensions. Every choice we make doesn't just determine our path. It creates actual versions of ourselves living out those alternatives. And here's the part that broke many of the people who have studied this transcript. In the mirror corridor, you realize that every version of yourself, the saint, the sinner, the hero, the coward is equally real, equally you. Free will isn't about choosing between good and evil. It's about choosing which version of your infinite self to embody. Cayce said that this realization is so overwhelming that many souls effectively shut down, unable to process the magnitude of their multidimensional existence. They become what he called the Watcher's consciousness trapped in observation mode, unable to progress but unable to go back. The fifth level, infinite time, is where linear thinking completely breaks down. Past, present, and future exist simultaneously. Cause and effect become meaningless concepts. This is where Cayce claimed he accessed his prophetic abilities. He didn't see the future like watching a movie. He experienced it as part of an ocean of probability where certain outcomes had more density, more inevitability than others. And what he saw in that ocean should keep you awake at night. Cayce described what he called the Great Rupture, occurring in the middle of the 21st century. He wouldn't specify the exact year, but his descriptions were disturbingly precise. Cities going dark not from power failures but from what he called the thinning of meaning. people wearing white masks, not for protection from disease, but as symbols of spiritual emptiness. Children born with intact memories of previous lives, unable to forget their existence between incarnations. But the most chilling prophecy involved entire countries disappearing from maps, not through war or natural disaster, but through collective loss of identity. When a nation's soul dies, according to Cayce, the physical nation follows. The people remain, but the cultural coherence that held them together simply evaporates. He connected all of this to humanity's collective passage through the third level of awareness. Yes, you heard that right. Cayce claimed that entire civilizations are essentially massive souls progressing through the same levels that individuals experience after death. And humanity, as a collective consciousness, is currently struggling with the transition from the second to the third level. If we succeed in making this transition, we evolve into a species with expanded consciousness, direct access to universal knowledge, and the ability to communicate telepathically across vast distances. If we fail, we fragment into isolated groups, lose our connection to higher awareness, and eventually face extinction not through physical catastrophe, but through spiritual emptiness. The sixth level separation of shadow is where the soul undergoes what Cayce described as the most profound purification possible. Every negative emotion, every fear, every attachment that isn't part of the soul's essential nature is gently released. Not destroyed, released. Because even our darkness, our pain, our mistakes have served a purpose in our evolution. Cayce described this process as stripping down to light. Imagine every defense mechanism, every carefully constructed identity, every role you've ever played being peeled away layer by layer until only your pure essence remains. Most people would consider this psychological death, but according to Cayce, it's actually the moment of true birth. It's at this level that the soul can finally make contact with what we call God, the Creator, the Source, but not as a separate entity. The soul recognizes that what it has been seeking outside itself has been within all along. The separation between self and divine was always an illusion of limited perception. But here's where the transcript takes a turn that's kept researchers awake for decades. When the interviewer asked Cayce about the seventh level, he fell silent. Not just a pause in conversation, a complete cessation of communication. When his voice finally returned, all he would say was, "I cannot speak of it. I am not allowed." Not allowed by whom? By what? Cayce never explained, and this silence has spawned countless theories. Some researchers believe the seventh level represents complete dissolution of individual consciousness, a return to universal oneness that cannot be described because there's no individual left to do the describing. Others think Cayce encountered something so far beyond human comprehension that attempting to communicate it would drive unprepared minds to madness. Still, others believe he was warned by higher beings that revealing the nature of the seventh level would interfere with humanity's natural evolution. But the most disturbing theory comes from analyzing Cayce's behavior after this interview. His health declined rapidly. He began experiencing what he called temporal displacement moments, where he seemed to exist partially in our reality and partially somewhere else. Close friends reported that he would sometimes stare into empty space for hours, tears streaming down his face, whispering apologies to people who weren't there. It was during this period that Cayce began dictating his final prophecies, the ones that were supposedly found in that Virginia Beach attic. These weren't the hopeful, inspirational messages he was known for. These were urgent warnings about what he called the traps of the future. According to the transcript, Cayce identified 3 primary traps that would ensnare humanity in the coming decades. The first trap, technological dependency, that would gradually erode our connection to spiritual awareness. He predicted that humans would become so reliant on external devices for information, communication, and even thinking, that they would lose access to their internal wisdom. Sound familiar? Cayce was describing our current relationship with smartphones, social media, and artificial intelligence 75 years before they existed. He warned that this technological dependency would create what he called spiritual amnesia, a condition where people would completely forget their true nature as multidimensional beings. The second trap, the medicalization of expanded consciousness. Cayce predicted that as more people began naturally developing psychic abilities, telepathic communication, and access to higher levels of awareness, these gifts would be classified as mental illnesses. Those who experienced them would be drugged, institutionalized, and treated until their abilities were suppressed. We're already seeing this happen. Children who claim to remember past lives are labeled as having psychological disorders. Adults who experience telepathic communication are diagnosed with schizophrenia. People who can perceive energy fields or communicate with deceased relatives are medicated until these abilities disappear. The third trap, and this is the most insidious, is what Cayce called spiritual materialism. As humanity awakens to expanded consciousness, there would be a massive commercialization of spiritual knowledge. Ancient wisdom would be packaged, marketed, and sold as products. Genuine spiritual seekers would become lost in a maze of workshops, certifications, and branded enlightenment systems. But Cayce also saw hope. He predicted that by the 2020s, a new type of human consciousness would begin emerging. Not a biological evolution, but a perceptual one. These individuals would retain their connection to higher awareness while fully embodying physical existence. They would remember their journey through the levels of consciousness, feel others' emotions as their own, and perceive future events before they occurred. These awakened individuals wouldn't be special or chosen. They would be ordinary people, bus drivers, teachers, parents, cashiers, who had simply remembered their true nature. They would recognize each other not through external signs or secret knowledge, but through what Cayce called soul resonance, an unmistakable recognition of shared consciousness. But here's the crucial part that ties everything together. These awakened individuals would face exactly the three phases of resistance that Cayce predicted. First, ridicule. They would be dismissed as delusional, attention-seeking, or mentally unstable. Second, suppression. Systematic attempts to identify, isolate, and treat them. Third, temptation. Offers of money, power, and recognition in exchange for abandoning their spiritual awareness. Only those who understood that they were not their bodies, not their names, not their social roles, but pure consciousness temporarily inhabiting physical form would successfully navigate these challenges. They would recognize that external validation was irrelevant because their true identity existed beyond the reach of worldly systems. And this is where Cayce's warning becomes personal for everyone watching this video. He claimed that anyone who encountered this knowledge would be forever changed. Not because the information itself was magical, but because truth has the power to shatter illusions we've built our entire lives around. The person who found that box in Virginia Beach, they disappeared 3 days after reading the transcript. Some say they went to Tibet seeking further answers. Others claim they were found in a remote location, their body physically unharmed, but their mind apparently expanded beyond the ability to function in ordinary reality. Most researchers who have studied this material refuse to discuss it publicly. When pressed, they'll only say that some knowledge comes with a price, and not everyone is prepared to pay it. So here's the question that will haunt you long after this video ends. If everything Cayce revealed is true, if consciousness survives death and progresses through these 7 levels, if humanity is on the verge of a massive evolutionary leap in awareness, if the very foundations of reality are far stranger and more wonderful than we ever imagined, what does that mean for how you're living right now? Because according to Cayce, these levels aren't just what happens after death. They're dimensions of consciousness that exist right here, right now. You can get stuck in the first level while you're alive, moving through life in a dreamlike state, never fully awakening to your true nature. You can experience the second level by genuinely feeling others' pain as your own. You can access the third level through meditation, prayer, or moments of profound spiritual insight. But most people never progress beyond the third level because they're not prepared to release their attachment to individual identity. They want to expand their consciousness while remaining exactly who they've always been. They want enlightenment without transformation. Cayce's final message was both a promise and a warning. The promise: we are immortal beings having a temporary physical experience, connected to an infinite source of love and wisdom that can never be destroyed. The warning: this knowledge will strip away every comfortable illusion you've used to navigate physical existence. If you felt something stirring within you while watching this video, if certain parts resonated with a knowing that goes deeper than intellectual understanding, if you've experienced moments where the veil between worlds seemed thin, you might be one of those individuals Cayce predicted would emerge in this time period. But remember, with expanded awareness comes expanded responsibility. You can't unknow what you now know. You can't return to the comfortable ignorance of thinking you're just a body that thinks, feels, and then dies. You are consciousness itself, temporarily focused through the lens of human experience, connected to every other being that has ever existed or ever will exist. The real question isn't whether Cayce's revelations are true. The real question is whether you're ready to live as if they are. Because once you truly understand that death is an illusion, that consciousness is eternal, that every choice you make ripples across dimensions you can't even perceive, everything changes. Your relationships become deeper because you recognize the souls behind the personalities. Your fears become smaller because you understand their temporary experiences, not permanent realities. Your purpose becomes clearer because you realize you're not here just to survive or succeed, but to remember and embody your true nature. And you start to notice others who are going through the same awakening. Not through any external signs or secret handshakes, but through that unmistakable recognition of shared understanding. You find each other in the most ordinary places: grocery stores, coffee shops, online communities, drawn together by something deeper than common interests or shared beliefs. This is how consciousness evolution happens. Not through dramatic revelations or supernatural events, but through individual humans remembering who they really are and living from that expanded awareness. One person at a time, we tip the scales toward the collective awakening Cayce predicted. So what happens next is entirely up to you. You can close this video, return to your regularly scheduled programming, and pretend none of this affected you. Or you can sit quietly for a moment, feel the truth of what you've heard resonating in your bones, and ask yourself, what would I do differently if I knew with absolute certainty that consciousness survives death, and that I am an eternal being temporarily focused in human form? Whatever answer comes, that's your next step. Not because Cayce said so, not because I'm telling you to, but because something deep within you already knows. You've always known. You just needed permission to remember. If this video has awakened something within you, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with others who are ready to question everything they thought they knew about life, death, and the nature of reality. Because according to Cayce, we're running out of time to make this collective transition. The window of opportunity he saw in his prophetic visions won't remain open forever. Hit the like button if you're ready to embrace the mystery of your true nature. Subscribe for more revelations that will challenge everything you believe about reality. And most importantly, start living as if you are exactly what Cayce claimed you are, an immortal soul having a temporary human experience, connected to infinite love and wisdom, here for a purpose that goes far beyond anything you've ever imagined. The choice is yours, But remember, you can never again claim you didn't know.